Chapter 1931. The Price for Alliance. So, you're saying that you would accept our young into your guild for training, and only ask that they remain as your elders' first mates for as long as the training? And then you would not force them to remain part of the guild? The captain asked, making it perfectly clear. Exactly. Training takes some time, but your elves, even if you weren't immortal, a decade of training for the slowest of them wouldn't be a major setback in their plans. Even after 20 years with us, they'll still barely be considered adults by elven society, and they will be fully trained with advanced classes and epic skills. Think of all the benefits they could bring when they come back home. That made the elves pause. We will agree to your terms for the training of our students on one condition. You must not keep them away from the sea. Especially the shamans, they need to be on the water. Carl considered the options, then nodded. I believe that we have a way to make that happen. The Darklight host might not have the naval fleet that the elves do, but there is no reason we can't establish a fishing fleet to keep our trainees acquainted with the ocean's nature. The captain smiled at Carl's deduction. Fishing boats were where almost all their kids started out. First as hands, then as fishing boat captains, or as hands on the merchant vessels. Some without talent would remain as fishing boat captains and use their experience to help train the younger generation. Those with promise would move quickly to the larger boats. If that was what the Darklight host was planning to do, having them start out learning their skills on a fishing boat near the city, it would be perfectly in line with their existing culture. Then that is settled. Now, on to our next point. Those layered illusions that you are using for the guest rooms, we want them for our ships. But we need them at Supreme Ranked. Carl gave the captain a curious frown. You know that is going to be exceedingly expensive, right? Supreme Ranked rune work is not cheap by any measure. The captain sighed and nodded in acceptance. Oh, we know, but we're willing to pay the price to get it. The Valalan League has been cracking down on our merchants lately, and their investigation teams often include peak immortal beasts. Carl chuckled. Oh, bringing the drug dogs out to search for contraband on the ships. That's a bit rude of them. Everyone knows you don't bring the contraband to a major port. The elves gave a genuine laugh. You understand, but apparently they have forgotten. They haven't found anything yet, but they do have a nasty habit of trying to charge us import tax on treasures we have no intentions of trading to them. You can only carry so much in your inventory for safekeeping, which leaves too much exposed to their tax inspectors. Worse, the damnable golden hounds can sense the total value of items in your inventory. So, if you hide all the valuables, they threaten you until you pay a tax on your inventory. See, that is something I'm glad you told me before I went. As a beast master, my inventory is much larger than usual, and if they can sense what's in it, my tax rate would fund a small guild. Perhaps not a small one, given the mountain of loot in Kara's space and the value of the holy stones in Thor's. If you enter by land, it's not as bad. But they have them in the major cities now. They say that it's to search for wanted criminals after the incident with the Gathuzan clan. But they're expanding the practice much further than just the region where the clan was active. The elves noticed the recognition flash in Carl's eyes and knew that he was familiar with the Gathuzan clan in some way. Odd for a guild leader on this side of the continent, but not entirely unexpected. The Darklight host had branches in many worlds, and the Gathuzan clan was said to come from a divine war world. All right, I will relay the knowledge and see how long it will take for us to get one of our Supreme Ranked crafters to do the work for you. We currently have 2 of them with the ability. However, one of them is injured, and in recovery with clan leader Narissa of the New Home Merchant clan. The captain snorted with stifled laughter. I don't know about injuries, but I'm not sure if I would call what he's doing a recovery program. Carl shrugged. It makes him feel better. That was the final straw. The elves burst into raucous laughter, and the serious mood of the negotiation was lost. The Leakin pack leader and the clan leader had been all over each other at the party last night. It was obvious to everyone that they were an item, and still Carl had the gall to say something like that with a straight face. Given their ages, it was actually rather adorable to the elves that they had found an affection so pure that they were so loving in public, like youngsters seeing their first taste of love. What will it cost for us to get the enchantments for 2 vessels? The captain asked, bringing the conversation back to money and not the clan leader's romantic life. As trade partners, I believe that we can standardize it. The runic array is 40,000 characters. The elves blanched a pale gray that reminded Carl that they had come from the dark elven lineages. 40,000 characters at supreme rank might as well be asking for an epic skill book. That was not something that could be purchased with mere coins, and they would have to trade resources to get it. However, there were always options when it was a long-term trading partner. We will offer you 20% below wholesale price for raw resources you purchase from us for the next 2 shipments. Carl smiled, and the elves began to think they had miscalculated. No, this was fine, they would take a hit, but no worse than many of the nations that taxed imports. They could afford this. Chapter 1932. Loaded questions. Carl considered whether he should push for more, but made a show of reluctance before accepting their already generous terms. I will accept on behalf of the Guild's supreme-ranked crafters. But now that you've made the offer, how about we start with some trading now? The captain groaned, realizing that they had walked right into his trap, and that Carl would likely purchase a massive amount of their raw materials, even if he didn't need them. He was, after all, allied with the new home merchant clan, who could resell them if they were getting them 20% below wholesale. They had a massive amount of raw materials on board, and they had hoped to unload a large portion of it to the Darklight host in exchange for their runic gear. But now it was looking more like they were going to leave with no raw materials at all. And the same would happen on the next shipment. But that also set a precedent. 2 ships given a duplicate hold in a separate space, 2 shipments worth of discount. So, the array was worth a 20% discount on their entire cargo. They had nearly 1,000 tons of raw materials on board between the 2 ships. They were fully loaded, and this was their first stop. Of course, we can start trading. As we agreed to use the system's standardized pricing to determine wholesale value, we can show you our cargo list, and you can show us what you have to trade. Carl nodded. Do you want to start with the rare grade immortal gear? That's what we have the most of, but we also have a significant amount of uncommon grade immortal gear, and a rather valuable portion of epic grade items made by our elders. If you would like supreme rank items, we have a limited selection, but we also have some peerless grade gear. That will cut down on the volume of cargo you'll be carrying, but the equipment won't come close to filling your hold either way. The elves considered the option for a moment. Then one of the silent captains drummed his fingers on the table and smiled. We would also like some of the rare grade spider silk. We have been short on it for our clothiers at home, and intended to trade for it at the shops here. Carl nodded. I can do bulk silk, and you can purchase ready-made clothing separately if you would like. 50 bolts of rare-grade silk as part of the shipment. Carl nodded. Not a problem. Do you have a preferred color? The default is either black or white, but it can be spun directly in other colors, and we have some in stock. Black, white, and gold. Carl sent a thought to Ray, who transferred the silk to an open spot in her space for Carl to find. 50 bolts was nothing. She sold that much every day, and it only took her a few minutes to make. Carl set out 1 bolt of each color. For your examination, I can assure you that our producer will accept no flaws in the silk. The elves knew that very well. It was made by Ray, which was why they had wanted to get it on this trip. Spiders of that caliber were not often working in the trades, no matter how proud they were of their silks. At most, they would decorate themselves and a few close allies in the dark elven clergy, or spider-type beastkin allied to them. Ray still had plenty of those, but they were in the mortal worlds, and she supplied them with low-rank cloth so that they could keep the Drod Guildhouse supplied and make their sales targets. They also spun some of their own silk, but only at uncommon grade and their own rank, as they were not pure spiders. Their control wasn't good enough to alter the weave to make different grades. The captains examined the first few meters of the silk carefully and then nodded. This is beautiful. Yes, we will take all 50 bolts at this quality. Carl set them out against the wall, and then filled the table between them with rare grade accessories, scimitars, sabers, clubs, and leather armor. These were all things that the Leakin Pack specialized in making, or ones that had been made by Tion while he was practicing his blacksmithing skills. They really did need to recruit some more smithy workers. According to the system's ranking, this mountain of equipment was roughly 1/5 the value of the raw materials on the ships, but would cover 3/4 of the weight of the cargo. Only the precious materials would be left to trade for more precious items. The captain's mind spun quickly as they tried to calculate whether this was a deliberate power play by Carl. They had offered him a mix of resources, and he was offering them equivalent grades of items. If they brought him more valuable items in the future, would he increase the numbers of peerless grade items he traded in return? Or was this simply what he had on hand? Carl didn't say one way or the other, and simply began to set out epic grade and peerless grade items from the store's inventory until the value of the items on offer was equal to the 2 vessels worth of goods, minus the 20% discount. The captains carefully sorted through the gear, ensuring that it was all suitable for their customers. A few items were set aside as too specialized for easy sale, and Carl quickly replaced them with ones that had more common bonuses. The power levels by grade were always roughly equivalent, but the bonuses were random, and if you got something powerful but rare enough that only a few people would want to use them, it was not great for sale to a merchant, even though it would sell for a fortune in the store. Guild leader, I believe that we have a deal. Now, where would you like for us to move the cargo? I will accompany you and move them directly to the guild warehouse for verification once they are off your ships. It's a guild store vault, so I will get an exact accounting from the system that I can show you to eliminate all doubts and fears of deception. Now, this was a man who was easy to deal with, even if he had taken all the fun out of haggling. Chapter 1933. Only 2? Carl accompanied the elves back to their vessels at the docks and found that while the report had called this a fleet, it was really just the 2 trading vessels, plus a group of fast schooners, attack ships that could run down nearly anything on the high seas. While they were not considered to be heavily armed, with only 1 row of cannons on them, the actual firepower came from the crew on board. They had to be expecting trouble at some of their stops to have brought so many defensive vessels for only 2 cargo ships. Or they were expecting to come across hostile merchant vessels that they could liberate cargo from. It didn't matter to Carl. Those were not his guild members, and the loot that came from them would be unlikely to make it back to the Darklight host. The ships weren't even traveling back in this direction. The only thing that he would usually see from the Blue Elves was raw materials, as that was what they had in abundance during their first few stops. However, their precious cargo did raise a few questions for Carl. Captain, what can you tell me about that low mana zone in the ocean to the southeast? He asked. The elf frowned. There are a lot of theories about it, but nobody can get close enough to verify. No matter how long you sail in that direction, once the mana gets to half the standard rate, it stops dropping, and you never get closer. Once you turn away, you'll find that you didn't make any progress at all, and you are exactly where the mana stopped dropping. Not somewhere nearby, exactly there. Even the stars will show that you're not moving, but the ships and winds know that they're sailing just fine. So, the rumors abound, but none of us have the true answer. Carl nodded. So, the cause is unknown, but it sucks in a massive amount of mana constantly, to the point that it causes currents in the mana in this region. That's why I was asking. I'm sure you've noticed that we tweaked the mana flows a bit to cause a greater mana level in the city, using mana gathering arrays. But I had to be certain that it wasn't an active source, like a giant sea monster or something, that we might upset by changing the pattern. The captain shook her head. No, it's fine. By the time you get near the anomaly, the flow is back to normal. It's only in the region near shore that it's noticeable that you've disrupted the old flow of mana. Many cities do the same thing, but the overall effect is minimal on a grand scale. Then all is well that ends well. Carl continued to sort goods into the guild store's warehouse, keeping them segregated so that they could all see the value balance adding up. There were a few damaged and off-quality items in the shipments, but Carl didn't mind. The crafters would find a way to work with them, or he would send them to Drouth and let the totem and mythic crafters use them instead. Even a mediocre immortal resource was still an immortal resource. The captains silently celebrated as Carl only watched the values and not the actual quality of the items. They had assumed that he would turn away some, which was the normal practice. Things got damaged in transit, and the price that they paid the gathering teams reflected that shrinkage. But Carl simply took it all and let it sit in the warehouse, waiting for someone to need it. In the guild house, the carving teams were nearly going insane watching the warehouse fill, while access was locked. That coral, the shells, the pearls, and elemental stones. All of it was prime material for making items and statues. But they couldn't access it yet. It was almost like going to an all-you-could-eat buffet and being told to stand next to the buffet and wait with nobody in line. Torture. Finally, the flow of goods stopped, and Carl extended his hand to the captain with an epic grade bracelet in it. You came out overestimate. Here is the difference. We can't have anyone saying that the Darklight host doesn't pay its debts. The captain laughed and shook Carl's hand as he took the bracelet. It's a pleasure doing business with you, Guild Leader Carl. We will send over the trainees later today. They don't travel with our merchant ships, for obvious reasons. Carl nodded. Do you need a portal array? I have one here in town that will greatly boost your range, or a portable one that's only marginally less effective. The portable should do. We have one on the ship as well. Carl nodded and took out the Peerless Grade Portal Array disc. He rarely needed to use it, but it had been made for the guild, not for him personally. It did have one major advantage, though. Since he was standing right here when it was used, he would have the memory of where it was open to, so that he could open it to the same location again. Whether it was to send the trainees home for a visit, or to shop directly with the Blue Elves, was questionable. But it would now be an option. The elves weren't concerned about it, as they assumed it was impossible to know where a portal went without stepping through it. But more than that, it went to a public area of their floating city, and if a random person just appeared there, they would be in chains within seconds. Forget intruders. There were no outsiders at all allowed in their city. The portal shimmered into existence, showing them an empty courtyard. But what Carl saw on the other side with his enhanced senses was very different. That's a turtle. Oh, we need to show Leo this. Who is Leo? My false island giant turtle. He will be so mad if he finds out that we opened a portal to one of his kind, and he didn't get to see it. The elves frowned. The city is no longer alive. The great turtle perished in battle many centuries ago. Carl shook his head. No, I can sense the divine energy. The demigod turtle is in hibernation, not dead. Chapter 1934. The Great City. Leo came out in Tortolin form and waved happily toward the portal, while not speaking out loud. Just like the Sero Pax, his people could speak to each other mentally, and he had received a thread of awareness from the Elven city the moment that he arrived. Oh, that's cool. He's fully become the city. I like it. That's a unique path for a turtle, but it's working out amazingly well for him, isn't it? It's even made him a demigod. The elves looked confused as Leo fell silent, so Carl tried to explain. The turtle gets a bonus to its growth from the people living in the city on its back. It takes a massive amount of energy for it to do anything, and it may not know how to transform like Leo does. So, it hibernates or cultivates, depending on how you look at it, and your people actually provide the energy it needs by simply living on its back. The mana that you radiate, the excess life force of however many elves are in the city, are fueling its slow path to divinity. The captain frowned. You're saying that the turtle is still alive? Our history with the Great Turtle is a long one, and our people have mourned its passing for centuries. To hear that it is not dead is hard to accept. Leo looked up. I can confirm that she is not dead. Not likely to wake up anytime soon. It would take too much energy. But not dead. I don't know the details. It's like talking to someone who is dreaming. Carl shrugged. It was truly difficult to kill a demigod. You can likely keep that knowledge to yourselves. If my guess is right, it won't make any difference in the next few thousand years while the turtle heals from the damage it took. The captain nodded. We will treat it as a rumor. There have been others like it before, shamans who said that they sensed support from the Great Turtle as they rose to power. After a moment, an elder of the Blue Elves arrived with a group of students in what Carl guessed were their equivalent of student uniforms. They all matched anyhow. All youths. All with the same blue-gray skin and white hair. All wearing the same black leather pants with white linen tunic shirts and red silk bandanas hung around their necks. I thought you didn't need red? Carl asked. It's not that we don't use it. That's the color for students, so that we know they're not fully trained. It's just that we've got enough and didn't need more. That makes sense. I will have to ask them about all the formal dress codes for the Blue Elves so that I don't offer them things that are inappropriate. The dress code on the high sea is most likely very different than it is on land, especially here in the south, where the waters are cold. The captains nodded. They have brought a guide for you, just in case. Very considerate. The only elves we have here at the moment are the forest kind, and they're a bit different. The thought made the captains chuckle. Well, at least they appreciate a good tan. That they did. The nature priestesses always had a good tan, and very few tan lines. The kids were looking around the docks with wonder in their eyes. They had never in all their 70 years been out of the city. By elven standards, they were high school students, and when they graduated from their time with the Darklight Host, they would only just be becoming adults. The Blue Elves had planned it perfectly once they relayed the deal they had made with Carl. A decade of training, a decade of work experience as apprentices, and then they would be ready to return to the fleet to begin their careers. With a bit of luck, they should even be on the fast track to becoming captains. Carl saw the calculation that they had done, but he didn't mind. These elves all had immortal spirits fully formed, even if they weren't fully grown. Their species took so much longer than humans to mature that it would have been somewhere between shocking and disgraceful for someone their age not to have at least formed their immortal spirit. They probably couldn't advance much further right now, as their bodies weren't fully matured and ready to begin the Void Realm transformation. But they didn't have to be powerful, just capable of safely going outside for training. There were 10 of them in total, a reasonable number, and Carl saw that they all held themselves with a level of pride that spoke volumes about their status. If they hadn't been from the higher tiers of society, they wouldn't have that unconscious arrogance that assured them that everything would be fine no matter where they went and what they were doing. Some of that would be shattered very soon, when they started training with the Darklight Host, but they would regain it not long after, once they were confident in their new skills. The question was just what skills they were going to need. Things related to sailing were obvious, but Carl would need to know about their classes and affinities before he made too many decisions. They might not even be suited for crafting skills. If they were, that would be great, especially if they were suited for nature skills, so that he could start working on a base of shipbuilders for the guild. They knew about sailing, they knew what a ship needed, and the functional parts that made blue elven ships superior. It was common knowledge to all of them, and they often joked about it with the groups they traded with. If Carl could also get that knowledge, they could build a shipyard here that would create a fishing fleet beyond anything else in the region. A fishing fleet that could double as cover for resource-gathering missions. They might also know sea dungeons. I would like to try a sea dungeon, Leo added. We will find out soon. Welcome, everyone. The Darklight Host will be in charge of the next phase of your training, and I do hope that you're all prepared to spend a bit of time ashore. But rest assured, it will not be forever, only until you've learned the core skills to get you back on the ocean. Chapter 1935, Hidden in Plain Sight. Carl turned to address the captains. Now, I will bring out our supreme ranked runesmith, and I hope that you can get your upgrades sorted out quickly so that you're not late for your next stop. That made the elves laugh. Carl had bought everything. Their next stop was not in any particular rush, as they had no idea how wonderful the goods that were coming to them were going to be. Rue came out with a veil hiding the lower half of her face and nondescript robes in the half-white, half-black pattern of the Darklight Host. That would not hide her power level as a supreme, but what she was hoping to hide was, Lady Rue? The war god of Gthuzan is your other supreme? The captain gasped. I would appreciate it if you didn't make a fuss about it. We don't want anyone to know that she is here, but we did agree to make you supreme ranked upgrades to your ship, and she is the only one present who can do it for us today. The captains put their hand over their heart and nodded. On our honor, we will not reveal that the Lady Rue has become a pillar of the Darklight Host. That was as good as Carl could hope for. But most places didn't allow the Blue Elves to hang around and gossip, so the chances that they spread the news before he was ready were slim. And if they did, people should remember that Rue was not a pushover. The city was guarded far beyond most clan compounds, and certainly at a higher level than it had been the day that it fell. But more than that, the members of the Darklight Host were incredibly capable in combat. Few would dare to openly come after Rue, no matter their grudges. Rue nodded to the captains and gestured toward the docks. We can go do the work now, while Carl introduces the young ones to their new homes. I'm certain that they will settle in quickly, and I will set up a specific training area for them so they don't get homesick. With her assurances, the captains were absolutely certain that there was not going to be any issue with the trainees adjusting to their new homes. Rue examined the ships with great interest as she stepped off the docks. There were dozens of layers of elven magic on them, built up over generations of users. Some of it was dormant, forgotten. Other layers were suspended, waiting for the moment they needed to be used. The propulsion magic was one of them, the combination of wind and water magic that would calm a spot in the ocean around them and increase the wind so they could travel more quickly without needing protective barriers on the ship. She made mental notes of everything so that she could integrate it into future designs. They might not have the natural elegance of the elves, but dragons knew about things that went fast. So, she would create ships for the Darklight host and enchant them to a level that would impress even the elves. Though, she would probably have Tion do it instead, as nobody could afford a supreme-ranked epic-grade merchant vessel. That was just a ridiculous thought. But Tion could make thin alloys, form a durable metal ship, and imbue it with enough runic magic to sell it to merchants with the promise of being more resistant to cannon fire than a wooden one. At least, after the barriers on both failed. Rue was mentally planning the design that she was going to have Tion make the new ship in. She was also laying out the runes on the interior walls and floor of the hold. She didn't put them on the hull, as it was the most likely to be damaged in combat, and they couldn't afford to have the spell damaged during battle and slowing down the ship with a sudden influx of weight. Is there a reason that the runes are in those specific locations? The captain asked curiously as Rue worked. Actually, yes. These areas are the least likely to ever be replaced. Since they're not major wear points, and there are multiple bulkheads and barriers between them and the outer hull, even if the ship is scuttled, the separate space should remain intact. If nobody knows about it, even the divers won't recover the true treasure from a sunken ship. The captains shared an excited smile. There was no better news than that. Even if they lost everything, including their ships, they just had to escape with their lives, and there was a good chance that they could come back and recover their treasures in the future. As long as the ship wasn't lost in waters too deep to dive. Magic could take you to the deepest depths of the oceans, but it could not always protect you from what you would find when you got there. It only took Rue a few minutes to finish the hold, and then she linked the spell to the captain of this vessel before activating it. I had considered giving you a token to grant access, but that's too easy to steal. So, I linked it directly to you, and I can link your first mate if it pleases you. Otherwise, nobody can enter without your express permission. The captain shook his head. No, this will be perfect. If anyone enters this hold on a normal day, they need to get the access token from me. So, nothing will change, and I can still control the access with a token, which will keep outsiders from getting suspicious. The other captain nodded his agreement. Keeping the hold under lock and key is the natural way of things, and needing to both access the regular hold and then the interior secondary hold will keep most intruders from suspecting that there is anything off. Rue considered that, and added a bit more to the runes. I added a soul trap to the main hold as part of the inscription. Those who enter and see the runes will think that the trap is part of it. If they enter with the intentions to steal, or without permission, it will cause immense spiritual pain. Even thinking about stealing while in the hold will trigger it to a lesser extent. And that can be used to convince your crew that the upgrades are to protect the hold, instead of having to make up a story for them. If they know an answer that can be told to the public, even a truth spell won't work to get the secret. Chapter 1936. Drop them in. With the first hold finished, Rue moved on to the second, while the first captain went to inform his crew of the upgrades to security. They would accept the version that he told them, never suspecting that there was more to it. After all, a supreme-ranked protective spell on the hold would keep the customs officers honest, and it would be hilarious the first time that one of them collapsed in spiritual agony for attempting to steal during an inspection. They were all looking forward to it. None of them were too concerned about their own crew. You had to be somewhere between suicidal and brain-dead to try to steal from the captain to begin with. The first captain went inside to inspect his new layered hold as soon as everyone left, and realized that Rue had not just made one layer, but two. There was the actual ship's hold, an illusionary ship's hold that looked exactly like it, but empty, and a vault-themed storage realm. It was clear what one was supposed to be what, and having the first one appear to be the same as the actual hold gave them options for where to hide things based on how much they didn't mind them being found. The first layer was one that you could break into if you had those sorts of skills. But the second layer took immense knowledge to even detect, and very few would be able to even find its existence, much less find a way into it. The second captain was no less impressed with the work that Rue did for his ship, and even generously tipped her with a nearly black water gem that matched her eyes. It was a touching gesture intended to keep him on the good side of the dragon. She might seem laid back right now in the Darklight Host, but he regularly ran the route to the north, and nobody who had been to the Valalan League could possibly be unaware of her reputation. Rue returned to the guild house and found that Carl had not set the new elves up in the guild house, but in the tiny world. The entrance was open to her, so she went to see how the blue elves were doing, only to find that they were being swarmed by hatchlings. The young dragons had never met anyone who had lived on the ocean before, and they had questions. So many questions. But it was also meal time, and that meant everyone had a bit of time off so they could chat before they had to do anything productive. It also gave them time to get used to the new setting, while Carl prepared the basics of a new training area. With the improvement of his runic skills, it was time that he made a new trial tower anyhow. They had one set up for combat trials, so now he would make another that was specifically for training, and he would add an open ocean option so that they could practice their skills in simulated extreme conditions. Every student they had sent was some sort of shaman class, based on the color of their class tags. They were likely specialized ones specific to the blue elves, but if they were water and wind elemental shamans, they were going to need somewhere that was not on land to practice properly. And that was a great opportunity for Remy to work on her water skills. For a reason other than annoying Hawk. Is it always so lively in here? One of the students asked. In fact, it really is. The more people we bring in, the more fun it is, Dana agreed. Has Carl explained what the plan is for your training, or did he just drop you here for dinner with the dragons and decide to ask all the questions later? That second one. Yeah, I suspected that was the case. And he will likely use a construct to train you as well. But that's normal around here. If we know a creature that we can summon who is perfect for the job, we let them do the teaching. Now, you're all shamans, right? I'm assuming that you're planning to take over from the previous generation of captains when you're grown enough? So, you'll need both ship travel and combat-related skills? The elves nodded. We will also need skills related to trade, negotiations, and ship operations. We've been training them for a few decades already, but we were under the impression that the Darklight Host had a number of truly rare skills hidden away for their acolytes. Dana laughed. Oh, that we do. Mostly, they're crafting and not maintenance related, though you can use some of them for both. If you have the sort of plant growth skills that Leo and some of the nature priests do, you can repair the wood of a ship. If you have Remy's weather control abilities, you can turn nature against your enemies as you travel. But if you have something like runic shipwright as a crafting skill, you could make your entire ship from scratch and repair anything that got damaged on it, including the wards. Is that even a thing? Probably. I bet that if we ask Carl, there's almost certainly a way to make it a thing. Carl looked back from where he was making the new training area. I think that I can do it. I don't know much about elven shipbuilding, but I can try for something that will work and let you make a fully enchanted ship. However, for the magical wood with special properties, you still need other related skills. Nature skills alone have limitations when it comes to making higher-grade magical plants. The elves understood that concept very well. They had many people who could create elemental items, but for anything higher than uncommon grade base stock, you usually had to find it somewhere. The known skills simply couldn't make the really good stuff that came with additional bonuses before being crafted. Chapter 1937. Rue has done many things. Rue smiled at the young elves and their enthusiastic attitude toward training. You know, if you're going to be going out into the world as an officer on a proper trade vessel, you will need to know how to fight. If you can't fight, you get no respect. With no respect, you can never hope to progress. So, you should learn to strengthen your combat skills along with your basic trade and other skills. I think that it would do you a world of good. Why don't we start with a bit of shipboard combat training in the new tower? Just give me a moment to tweak the power limits, and there shouldn't be any issues. After all, a Supreme's 99% damage reduction really cuts down on the barrier mana use. Carl waved for her to do as she pleased, since a better training area was an improvement for everyone involved. Plus, he was interested to see what Rue's version of shipboard combat training looked like. Rue sent a pulse of power through the mostly formed training tower, and Carl watched as the area improved to Supreme ranked, and then gained a few new functions that Rue thought would be interesting, but that Carl hadn't thought of. One of those was the mirror match function. You could enter and have the area duplicate your physical body, and most of your skills. Then it would fight against you so that you could better yourself based on what you could do. For most people, that was largely pointless. But for Carl and a few others, it was invaluable advice that would help them use their skills more effectively. Carl just wanted to see what 2 Chaos Badgers in one spot would be like. Why don't we all go inside and test out our sea legs? I haven't been on a ship in some time, but I have a fair bit of sailing experience. Rue suggested. You were a sailor? There is a lot that I don't know about your time away. Dana noted. Rue winked at her. I will fill you in on all the fun stuff eventually. Now, in we go. I think that I go the ship designs about right. Our first test will be for the students, so that we can see the baseline that they were sent to us with. You're all shaman types, right? So you wouldn't be part of a boarding team. That means that you're on the defender side. You'll have some time to prepare before the event starts. The elves looked confused, but Carl and Kara escorted them all into the door of the training tower, where they were deposited onto the deck of a merchant ship very similar to the ones that the blue elves used. This one is actually from the Wave Riders on another world. But they're also blue elves, so you will be familiar with most of their functions. Now, I've given you a 20-warrior crew to represent the actual crew size, as not the entire crew would be magic users. Now, show me what you have. The scene shifted, and a massive black ship loaded with wrath demons came barreling at them broadside from half a kilometer away. The demons were cheering in anticipation of a good fight, and one of the elves leapt to the wheel to spin their ship away. It was just in time, and the 2 ships sideswiped each other instead of getting the prow of the demon's ship into their hull. Masts! The elf at the helm shouted, and a pair of lightning bolts crashed into the demon's masts, shattering the wood to break them free and keep the ships from getting entangled. The demons threw grappling hooks to latch onto their rails and rigging, while others took a running leap onto the deck of the blue elves' vessel. The shamans brought up barriers on their people, and a wind blade knocked the first wave of boarders into the water. Carl and the others moved to the stern of the ship to watch the battle, while the elves used a series of whistles to coordinate their battle without words. It was highly efficient, but they were losing the battle. They were trained with their swords, but not well trained. Carl could confidently say that their blade skills were no better than his, and that was not a particularly high standard, especially for elves. They were more confident with their magic, but they were obviously only trained to work with a group of warriors, as there was only one shaman on most ships. The elves had a lot of rangers, warriors, and clerics, but the shamans were a more uncommon specialty. Once the demons were all on board, and the majority of the warriors had fallen, Rue raised her hand, and everything paused. All right, I have seen what I need to. You've completed the basics of your shaman combat training, but nothing on group work with other magic users, or on the proper blade work for a Wave Rider. Well, you're not technically Wave Riders, unless that's your class. But my point stands. So, instead of having you continue here on the ship, we will move you to something a bit more interesting. The scene shifted, and they were all standing on a wooden floating dock with a group of Naga bodyguards in front of them. This is a lower challenge scenario in some way, higher in others. The wave heights on the shore are generally lower, but they will break over the dock. Now, I will have the snakes teach you the basics of how to use a blade in an aquatic environment. Why not have elves teach us? You know, since we're elves. Rue laughed and created a sparring opponent that looked like a middle-aged shirtless dark elf covered in silver tattoos with red silk pants, bare feet, and a tricorn hat that immediately made Leo envious. That was a good hat. What is this? You've called a bunch of swabs here for me to play with? Shouldn't you let them grow up a little before we start to beat sense into them? He laughed, while giving the trainees a disdainful look. Chapter 1938. The Best Teachers. Damn you, arrogant bastard, one of the students shouted, and lashed out with a jet of water. The elf laughed and nimbly dodged it, then seemed to slide across the dock, and kicked the student into the surf. If you're not going to do better than that, I'm not even going to have to use my sword, and this is supposed to be a sword fighting lesson. The elf's amusement was clear, but so was his skill. The students drew their swords, intending to group up to fend him off and knock him from the constantly moving wooden dock. Blades flashed, and the man twirled between them, knocking students into the water every few seconds. None of them could even touch him. Once they were all in the water, he motioned for them to come back onto the dock. Get back here, and get ready to be educated. I might not be the most skilled fighter that you'll ever face, but your Uncle Drazit will happily teach you all how to use a sword. He produced a scimitar from nowhere and spun the blade around his hand, as if testing the balance. All right, first things first. We're going to teach you how to stand on a dock. Carl chuckled as he floated over the dock, and the dark elf winked at him. If you didn't want to slip off a wet wooden dock, not standing on it at all was the easiest way. But that was not what they were going to teach the students. I'm fairly sure that I know how to stand, one of the girls replied. I thought so, too, until I saw you all end in the water. Now, shift your weight. You don't want to have the weight on your heel unless you've got spurs on. Miss Rue, honored guests, there is seating to the side. This will take a while. That was Remy's signal, and she borrowed the Naga warriors that Rue had summoned first. If nobody else was going to use them, she would have them teach her combat skills for a Naga. They were much larger than she was, but so were most of her opponents. All right, what I want to learn is how to get more stabby. My sister, Ray, is super stabby, and I wish to learn to do that too. The more people that I can poke with my swords, the more potions I can test in real-world scenarios. Remy explained to the constructs. The two bodyguards nodded. Of course, matriarch. If you wish to learn, we will teach you. Now, did you want to practice on the dock or in the water? That was a good question. Let's do it underwater. I don't train underwater nearly enough. Naga were perfectly capable of functioning underwater, but Remy was rarely fully submerged, even when she was touring the swamps. The group disappeared beneath the waves to train their blade work in the soft sand of the ocean floor, while the elves on the docks struggled to master the precise shifts of balance that were demanded of them by the taskmaster of a dark elf that Rue had summoned. This guy knows his stuff, Dana noted as she focused on the man's footwork lessons with rapt attention. Rue laughed. He should. He was the better part of 500,000 years old when I met him. He trained more generations of dark elven blade masters than anyone in recorded history. Fortunately for them, he's been suppressed to the supreme rank, so he's not quite as fast, nor as arrogant, as he would be in real life. Carl laughed at the thought. He's more arrogant in real life? He's a demigod-level combat instructor, with tens of thousands of legends trained under his methods. He's earned the right to be arrogant. If you want, I can keep him active, and you can all train your combat skills with him after the students are done. He's really that good, even if the epic golem summoning can't truly replicate most of his skills. After all, it only replicates the ones that are usable at your level, and also only the ones that you are aware they possess. Even if you don't understand them, if they were active in your presence, they will transfer. That was news to Carl, and he made a mental note for next time he wanted to record an epic grade creature to summon. He needed to get it to use all its skills. But that was an issue for later. The trainer that Rue had brought out for the elves was incredibly talented, and the students were actually improving at a visible rate, as if he was teaching them skills without a skill book. I think I might join in now. They're likely all better with swords and footwork than I am, but I can be reasonably agile when I need to, Carl decided. So, you're going to join the children's training? Rue joked. Hey, they're almost certainly older than I am. Really now? How many years has it been since we first met? Dana laughed at the dragon's teasing. It had been at least 10,000 years since they had met, thanks to Carl being sent back in time to sort out her situation. So, in a way, Rue had a point. Then, Rue summoned an obsession demon on the shore. If you want to train with your wife, head over there, and you can have a lesson. Trust me, He will be well suited to the combat styles that you need, and you won't have to cause chaos with the children while you do it. We've already got one agent of chaos plotting ways to make the training more interesting. Kara wasn't sure if she had been caught, or if Rue simply understood her too well. Either way, that was not going to stop her from keeping the day interesting if the elves really did start getting too good at this footwork thing. They were actually managing to keep themselves on their feet through the whole footwork routine now, and that was way better than it had been. Chapter 1939. Training Demons. Carl and Dana stood in front of the obsession demon that Rue is called to train them, an unassuming-looking young woman with violet skin and long black claws tipping her fingers. Welcome, branch leaders. Miss Rue informed me that you have limited time to train, so I will get right into it. Unfortunately, you are not both suited to the same combat style, due to your skills and bodies. Even if Carl should shift, his forms are all unsuitable for the style that is best for Dana, according to Rue's memory. So, I will clone myself, and we can train both of you at the same time. Carl, please follow my alternate to the open area to the east. Dana, we can train right here. Carl followed the second demon into the distance, and waited as it set a large array on the ground. This is the easiest way to train a new combat style. One array is to suppress power, the other to suppress physique. Both are similar in function to the mana suppression array that you already know, but target a person directly, so they are of limited use against those stronger than you. Fortunately, you have not yet surpassed Lady Rue. Now, I will activate the training skill, and you only need to follow my movements. Once the basic forms are in your mind, we will spar to help set them into your combat style. Carl had no time to respond before the demon was moving in a seemingly impossible dance with a curved blade in one hand. Carl did his best to follow along, intensely focused on the movements of the trainer. There was definitely still a skill in effect that was helping teach him these moves, and as he practiced, they began to feel more natural. Curious if the form he was in mattered, Carl shifted to cat demon form and found that while he could move more smoothly, the precision of the movements didn't get any easier to master. He didn't change back, though. This was the form that he usually fought in, so it only made sense that he would learn a new combat form in it. So, while it didn't give him an advantage, Carl maintained his form until the movements began to make sense in a new way. Not as movements in a dance, as they had appeared, but the fastest transitions between various offensive and defensive stances. The dance was a long one, transitioning from every fundamental position to every other. If you increased the force behind the transitions, you had a vicious set of attacks that would look like the elegant dancing combat of the highly agile obsession demons. It was incredible. Skill master activation in new skill, Death Dance. Basic learned. Carl smiled as the system informed him of the good news, and his body shifted to fully embrace the combat style. Oh, this training usually takes days. But you have mastered the basics after only a few hours? Alright, the system doesn't lie. So we will move on to the intermediate level. Only 6 more levels of training until you can fully use the Death Dance.
Carl sighed.
6 levels beyond this? I know that my combat skills were sad, but I didn't think that they were that bad. The demon laughed, a surprisingly gentle sound. Oh, I'm sure you had some other combat skills, but not this one. That's fine. You'll learn how to blend them after you've finished getting the Death Dance to mastery level. It shouldn't take you long at this rate. Lady Rue learned it from her first immortal clan in less than a decade, without the advantage of a training skill or a skill book. To Carl, that was much more impressive. Learning with the aid of the system was nearly guaranteed, but learning a system-linked skill on your own to such a high level took an incredible amount of dedication. As he practiced the skills with a scimitar in his hand, Carl realized that the style was actually meant to fight multiple opponents at the same time. The footwork, the spare hand, the way that the balance shifted. It was intended to allow you to fight while fully surrounded. As a combat style, it really lived up to its name as the Death Dance. You said that Rue knows this combat style? Carl asked as they took a short break from training. Indeed she does. It's well suited to dragons, demons, and those with magical combat styles who often fight multiple targets. Your Dana mage will be learning a variation of it that is better suited to those who already have extreme blade skills. Now, that skill that let you learn it so fast, what is the cooldown? Carl shrugged. It's a random activation skill. The system decides when it activates, but it seems to be related to progression toward a target. If I'm not learning new ways to use a skill, it never activates, but if I'm actively making progress, it's much faster. The demon didn't seem happy with his answer, but the look of acceptance said that it wasn't anything outside of her expectations. When dealing with a world dragon avatar, random was expected. All right, we keep pushing forward, and we don't stop until you either stop learning or you master it all. We've got time, according to Lady Rue. She will take care of the store while you're busy, and Miss Ray is outside as well. Then it's a big learning day for all of us. Even Remy is learning new combat styles. Or flirting with the Naga. It could go either way. Naga combat styles are a bit strange that way, the demon agreed. Remy and romance? Unless he was made of potions, Carl didn't think it was highly likely. But now that Thor had children, it might be giving the others ideas. Remy laughed as she sensed Carl's thoughts. He was right the first time. Unless these teachers were made of reagents, she wasn't interested in their bodies. Chapter 1940, For Better Skills. Time inside the training area was strange. The sun never moved in the sky, which gave the whole place a sense of timelessness, though Carl knew that it was passing, as none of them had the skills necessary to stop or distort time. But when it always looked like mid-afternoon and you had the implacable skill, you never actually got tired. Just like the summoned demons, Carl could go indefinitely, though he did need to stop for food eventually. They took breaks at regular intervals and Carl ate, hydrated, and reviewed the lessons before they continued. So it was with great joy that he finally saw another activation. Skill Master Activation, Death Dance. Basic has improved to Death Dance. Well, that's the actual core skill learned. It no longer calls it the basic version, and just calls it Death Dance. Now, I suppose that the real work starts to try to improve it to the mastery level. The demon nodded happily. Yes, now the real work starts. This should be enough for you to go outside and fight using it. You won't embarrass yourself if you do. But if you can improve it 5 more times, you will move to the mastery level, and then you'll only have to research the Grandmaster level on your own. That is beyond my skills to teach. Learning a combat style really was much more of a hassle than learning a regular skill, Carl decided. He had already advanced twice with the help of Skill Master, and it was only enough to consider his skills not embarrassing to be seen in public. That wasn't exactly a glowing recommendation, but he would accept it. He just wondered how Dana was doing. On the beach, Dana sipped juice and laughed at the stories that the demon was telling her. While it was a summoned clone, created by the training space for her use, it came equipped with many of the memories of the actual person, who Rue knew well. I knew that you would do wonderfully with this skill. You know how to parry, and you've already got the mortal version of blade dancing, so the immortal blade dance was the next logical step. As a skill, it's not one of the most complex or the most deadly. But when you combine it with auto parry and golems, it makes you very nearly invulnerable to enemy attacks. You have caught on to the teleportation aspect of the skill very well, which I didn't expect. But you are more of a battle mage than a blade master, so you should have known it to start with, right? Dana nodded. Yes, I'm quite skilled with teleportation. It was just combining it with the attack and evasion skills of the new technique that gave me a headache. Fortunately, we have a Carl in here and Skill Master activated, or I might have been learning that one for months. The demon winked at her. There is no greater joy than having a husband that lets you skip the hard parts of life. Look, even the children on the dock have benefited from his skills, on top of the rapid learning skill that Lady Rue imbued onto this place. Who needed skill books when you had a combination that ridiculous? They were learning new skills in a matter of days with no books required, and it came with practical training, so you didn't have to learn how to actually apply the skills the first time you used them in a real battle. With that kind of advantage, they were going to have to start bringing the hatchlings in here soon, so that they could also master some of their basic skills to a higher level. Rue's training skills were far beyond what even Dana had expected, though she should have been suspicious when she learned that Rue used to have an incredibly powerful clan under her. Everyone who managed to become a clan leader powerful enough to threaten the status quo had at least a few tricks up their sleeves. Perhaps it was an issue with relative time? Carl remembered her more as the young dragon who needed assistance to grow into the birthright that she had inherited. So, That was the impression that leaked into Dana's mind. But Rue had lived 10,000 years since then, and many of them were in a state of constant war against armies of immortals. Not only had she survived, she had thrived and come out the other side after her faction had been destroyed with her powers intact. That alone was impressive, as Dana knew that there weren't many who survived the annihilation of their faction without defecting and starting over from the very bottom. So, after a short break, she was right back to training with her conjured instructor. Surely, the students were going to notice that the lessons had been going for far too long soon. Implacable might keep you from getting exhausted, but eventually most creatures would need to sleep, and the elves were unlikely to be used to staying up for days at a time. Once that happened, they would become groggy and lose their edge, even though they could theoretically keep fighting. Rue didn't let them go of that long, though. She had a soft spot for students and children who were trying their hardest. So, after only one solid day of training, she called an end to the session and gathered everyone to send them back out to get a proper meal and some sleep. Even Remy was excited to return now. She had learned many things, and she wanted to tell Elder Socrate all about the revelations that she had on how alchemical concoctions could be used in combat. Sure, she had learned a lot about fighting with 4 swords at a time, but that was personal. The Alchemy Elder would surely have more ideas on how to combine equipment with alchemy to make them even more effective than they were separately. That should keep the pair of them busy for at least 3 more days while they made experimental training pills. Sitting in silence as you worked was awfully dull after all.